And I'm living between Boston and New York, and I sort of am in a dream scenario for what I wanted to be in my life. I'm working for great organizations. I'm writing for great magazines and newspapers. I somehow ended up a contestant on the show Cash Cab. Things are going as best as they possibly can be going. But unfortunately, I realized that my father's health is in great decline, and he is very much towards the end of his life. And I'm the only of my siblings who can really go and take care of him. So I move out of that existence, and I come to Maine, and I take care of my father. This wasn't really a surprise, because around the age of 12 is when my father started saying things like, when I die, here is where there is some cash for you to have just in case you need it. When I die, here is how you handle probate court. When I die, and this happened regularly, my father was 25 years older than my mother. He was an old dad, and sort of you just wait for them to die, and in real time. So having to move back into my laundry room at home was a little difficult, and it was difficult for a couple of reasons, the big ones that you would understand, but also my father and I didn't get along really when I was a teenager. When I was 12, my parents divorced, and my mother moved to Boston, and she was the one I would have chosen to live with, but my father kept living in Maine, and I didn't want to move away from my friends, so I came to Maine, and he was just sort of given a new 12-year-old that he hadn't really parented before. And it wasn't really a cute coming of age story where we learned sort of important lessons. It was like The Odd Couple meets Mad Max all the time. It was a really sort of intense situation. And so it was hard to come back for those reasons. It was hard because I was in close proximity to death on a regular basis, sort of taking care of him, being reintegrated in that. There's a phenomenon in which caretakers are really prone to drug addiction because you're really bored and depressed and have so many good drugs. And that happened for me for about a year. And so it was like a rough scenario, and it sidetracked my sort of dream career and dream position. And I went into a great deal of debt, and things were hard. But I never regret it in any way because, in sort of that cliched way, I got to know my father in a way that I hadn't known him before. He sort of became a person. He told me about things that I hadn't known. Like, I think he was a bookie for the mob in Boston in the 60s. It was sort of vague, but he talked about that a lot. And I knew he'd been in the Korean War. I hadn't known why he had Purple Hearts, so he sort of went into that. He talked about post-traumatic stress. He talked about his regrets. He talked about his life. He talked about his gratitude, and it was sort of amazing to get to know him. But and that's sort of a cliche story that we all know, not know about me, but it's a cliche story they make movies about all the time. And but what was really nice was getting to know his sense of humor. I knew he was funny-ish, but never to me because we were at war all the time before. But we would go, say, he was a big guy. And we would go to the pharmacy, and he would stand in an aisle, and he would fart as loudly as possible because he was going to die, so he didn't care about what people thought. And he knew it embarrassed me, and that was big fun for him. And one time, his whole fingernail fell out, like the whole nail. It's gross. Some of you were eating it. I'm sorry. His whole nail came out. And he put it in an envelope, and he said, "To Alex," and he put it on the table and just left it for me to find with a note in it that said, "A gift from your morbid father." And that was a new side of him that I had not known. And then my absolute favorite one was when we were at the doctor's office, and I was signing him in, and he was across the room, and the room wasn't as full as this, but it was a very full room. And he said, "Hey, they're urologists. You should talk to them about erectile dysfunction." And so that's the man. And then he just laughed, like maniacally. And that's sort of the man that I guess my father was, and that I had not known. So it was hard in the ways that it was hard. I had to you're eating. I won't talk about it, but it was rough in the ways that you have to take care of a sick and a dying person. But I'm grateful for a couple different reasons. I'm grateful because I got to know him. I'm grateful because it upped my bar on stress. I mean, it's like any time something inconsequential comes up, I remember the time I took care of a dying father for 9 months, and that sort of recalibrates things. And I'm happy I got to know this man that I didn't really know before, and very specifically to know him as the sort of man who would yell across the room about his son's dysfunctional dick in order to make people laugh at a stranger. So So it was a good thing to go through. Thank you.